Today I'm going to be checking out this lithium iron phosphate battery that I was sent at no cost so that I could do this review. So to start, let's get this thing out of the box, take a look at the battery and everything it comes with. Then I'm going to get it charged up and do a capacity test on it. So let's get to it. So this is it. Basically what's in the box. You get the manual, you get the battery, you get these little plastic lug covers here for the bolts, and you get the lugs with it. They're tightened in pretty good. Standardized size bolts here, pretty standard size caps. It does come with the nylon handle that you can remove. I actually like the ones that you can remove because when you get them in the battery bank and you get them strapped down, you don't want all this stuff around it. So it's nice that you could just take these off. And even if you don't have this on, they still got little grabs on the sides. So it's not like your old lead batteries where you're struggling to find a place to hold it. But it's a pretty straightforward battery, 12 volt, 100 amp hours. We're going to do a capacity test and make sure that we can actually get the 100 amp hours, or really we're going to try to get the 1,280 watt hours that you would expect out of a battery like this. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing charged up, and then we're going to put a load on it and test it. So while I'm charging this up, I did want to show you a couple of the specs here. It is rated at 100 amp hours, 1,280 watt hours. So they did rate this with a 12.8 volt average. It's got pretty good cycle life. It does have a max charging amperage of 100 or less than 100, which is pretty standard. And they recommend 25, again, pretty standard. Max continuous discharge is 100, again, pretty standard. But what I did notice here is it says it has a peak current of 300 amps. Now, a lot of them have an overage when it comes to the peak current. They can do quite a bit more, usually double, something like that. But I do have some lithium iron phosphate batteries that you just go barely over 100 on the discharge and they just cut out. So it is a battery that can handle some peak spikes. So that's good. The rest of this is actually all pretty standard. They have this size here, which is, again, a standard size. I know I've said that a lot. But they also sell a mini version of the same battery, and it's just got the M, but the mini version is quite a bit smaller. So this one, though, is the standard, I guess what you would call full-size battery. Once it's charged up, we're going to do a capacity test and drain it down to see what we get. All right, so I've got the battery fully charged up and I've got it all set up and ready to go to start doing a capacity test to make sure that we get the full, 100 amp hours or the 1280 watt hours out of this battery that, we expect for a battery this size. So what I'm doing here is I've got a battery monitor here. This is going to be monitoring just the power coming out of the battery. 2000 watt pure sine wave inverter here. This has a tiny bit of overhead. All the inverters have a little bit of overhead, but we're not monitoring the inverter, we're monitoring the battery. So this should give us a real picture into what this battery is doing. Then I'm going to put in a power charger in this to pull pretty much a constant 150 to 200 watts, something like that, out of the battery, so we can just watch it go down and get down to its lowest point. So let's go ahead and get this thing set up to start running the battery. All right, I've got the load that I'm going to be putting on this plugged in, and as you can see here, the battery is resting at about 13.8. That's a pretty decent resting voltage. Sometimes they're a little higher, sometimes a little lower, based upon how long ago you pulled off the battery charger. But this looks good. We're going to go ahead and get this started. I'm going to turn this on. This does like a self-test, so it makes some noise and fans and all that. And then immediately we're going to start seeing that load kick on because it's going to start providing power. Let's do it. There you go. And all of that is very normal for this inverter. A lot of inverters. This one's probably a little noisier than some of the really high-end inverters, but it still does a really good job. And as you can see, it's already pulling about 212 watts. The load that I put on it is usually literally right at about 200 watts. So the extra 12 watts here is just the overhead of the inverter. But either way, we're just monitoring this. So we're going to let this run and see exactly how many watt hours we get out of this. So I'll be back when this starts getting low. All right, so we got the beeping. That is beeping from the inverter because of low voltage. This is saying 10.6. The inverter is saying 10.41. It's pretty normal to have a slightly different voltage there because this is recording the voltage, after it's moving everything through. And as you can see here, we have 1.33 kilowatt hours and 104 amp hours. So we've definitely gotten more out of the battery than it stated it was going to do. But again, also we have been pulling at about 200 to 220 watts the whole time consistently, which is probably about optimal to get all the power out of this battery. So these numbers right here, of course, will change a little bit based upon the type of load you're going to put on this. Now, I don't want to sit here and listen to this beep forever on the camera, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it again, and I'm going to let this go until it just completely drops, and we're going to see what it is. All right, well, that didn't actually take too long. I just had enough time to walk out of the room, and then it basically turned off and beeped. So that's the thing with lithium, though. They hold a really pretty level voltage, as they're being discharged, and once they get to the end, they start dropping quick. So this inverter did drop out. The BMS did not kick off because, as you can see, this is still powered. If the BMS would have kicked off, this would have went dark. So once the inverter hits 10 volts or less, that's low voltage and it's going to cut off. It starts beeping at 10.5, I think it is, and then it cuts off at 10. Now, that's going to be, of course, different than what this says because it's converting the power through and it's putting a load on it internally. So this is typically going to read a lower voltage than basically reading right off the terminals. Plus, you've got the cabling and resistance and all that. So as you can see here, the battery is now back up to what it says is 10.9, but this is it. I mean, you're not going to get any much more than that. Of course, it did exceed the specs. Like I said, 1.33 and 104 amp hours. So it definitely has the power in it that it said it would store. And it did great. I mean, it's definitely something I'm going to be putting in my RV. We are building quite a large battery bank in our RV, and this is going to get added to it. So keep an eye out for my next video on this battery. I am going to go ahead and cut open this case and see what the inside of this battery looks like, what kind of cells it has, what kind of BMS it has, and just the overall internal quality on this battery, just to give you a peek inside. I'm not going to completely tear them apart and destroy them because I do end up using these batteries, but I don't have a problem cutting it open and taking a look. So I hope all of this information was helpful. Keep an eye out on the channel. If you like these kind of videos, please subscribe to the channel. That really helps me out. And I will see y'all in the next video. Take care.